We've had interest in this topic from literally all over the world, and I'm thrilled that this topic is registering on everybody's kind of radars. A bit of background to me. So I have a very deep interest in essentially three topics: emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, and team emotional intelligence. And this is a whole sort of summary of what I do. I have multiple roles. So I'm an EMCC Global Assessor, and many of you will know that EMCC is all volunteers who are interested in moving forward the coaching profession, and it's all about evidence-based practice. I also primarily focus on CEO coaching and coaching executive teams. That's my primary kind of activity. I trained in the Global Team Coaching Institute first program last year, so was accredited by EMCC to the Team Coaching Quality Award standard, and I'm thrilled to have been part of that first group. But I've also trained in Scrum Mastery, as I call it, which is becoming more and more important in the work with executive teams. And I'm particularly interested in how do we actually help teams quickly get to the heart of the matter. And for that reason, I use the team emotional intelligence framework as the core of the work that I do with executive teams. And I also teach that as a methodology. And my best coaches are my husband and my son, who you see on this picture here. And I sing in 2 choirs as well. So that's just a bit of quick background to me. Now, the EMCC has created, through consultation, last year, the Global Team Coaching Core Standards. And if you're not familiar with these yet, I would highly recommend that you look at them and you get familiar with them, because the best programs in team coaching now are being benchmarked against these standards. So there are 2 different awards, and in EMCC, we love all our different acronyms. So the Team Coaching Quality Award, which is the one that programs like the GTCI have. There's also an individual team coaching accreditation. So it's well worth knowing that from the EMCC. Now, for our session today, I've basically divided it into 4 key topics. I'm going to start with some foundational principles on executive team coaching. We're then going to move into 2 short breakout huddles, and then I'll conclude with some top tips for progressing an executive team coaching practice. So how does that sound, everyone? Okay, thank you. I saw a few thumbs up there. Thanks very much. All right, so in terms of what it is, foundational principles. Now, we all know that team coaching is very much an evolving body of work within coaching. And I think that executive team coaching actually merits being a whole separate sector within team coaching. That's sort of my belief. So in terms of what it is, so I'm talking about coaching the team at the top of the house, whatever that team is called. Sometimes it's called the senior executive team. Sometimes it's called, in one team we're working with, it's called the operations leadership team. Sometimes it's the CEO team, but it's that team at the very top who are tasked with strategy and implementation. That's what I'm talking about. And I think about this as the storehouse, because literally there are so many things piled up in that top of the house team. So I've put some words there just to describe some of the things. So it's you know, there's a lot of hard work, blood, sweat and tears. There's a lot of struggle. And the thing I notice with that is that most teams are actually not very functional at all. So that's why I've called it a storehouse, because, you know, the dictionary says it's like a warehouse. I mean, there's so much in it. But we find that typically what happens is people manage their own part. They meet every so often for some key meetings, but the teams are not actually that functional. So what I've noticed is that when teams start to consider trust in the team, when they start to consider the emotional dimension, that's when they actually start the journey of becoming a team, and that's what leads to results. But this has taken me 11 years to realize that that's actually the journey of what happens. So in terms of some key principles, I've got 3 key principles that I think are at the heart of being successful in executive team coaching. And I'm going to walk through those one by one. So the first principle is, and real credit to Dr. Alison Hodge for the body of work that she has created around this through consultation with coaches and team coaches. And her work on mapping the dynamics of teams is just about to be published. She told me in an email today, literally any day now, the 2nd edition of this supervision handbook is going to be out. So really exciting about that. But in executive teams, when you look at all of these topics that are in this map created by Alison, this is going on at executive level, but in a way, it's more important to pay attention to every single topic in this map. And linked with that, and again, real credit to somebody, Marie Fair, who coaches, who is a supervisor coaching team coaching, to keep in mind that there are 3 relationship levels going on in a team. So there's the intrapersonal, interpersonal, and intra-team. Now, the work that I'm talking about is about the work at the intra-team level. The other 2 levels are very important, but they're tackled differently to what we tackle directly in the team. So let me explain that a bit further. So if the team were swimming goldfish in a bowl, what we're doing in the intra-team level is we're actually looking at that as a whole. We're looking at the whole goldfish bowl and what's going on around it, inside it, between all of the team members. But while we're doing that, there'll be 2 other things going on, but we need to distinguish them. So the intrapersonal, what's going on for the individual, we absolutely need to look at that, but it's through one-to-one coaching, and that doesn't come in to the executive team development. The interpersonal is about the relationships between people one-on-one, and that's important, but it needs to also be outside the team and tackled outside the team. I think in the early days, what we tried to do was mix all these up, but it actually doesn't work. And then the third principle is that there's such a deep body of work now, all about the emotion context in teams. Now, Susan Fiske and others have come up with predictable emotional and social needs in a team when people are working together. And the problem happens when it's all very well knowing that those needs are there, but when we don't address them, it leads to underperformance. So we come in as executive team coaches and we come into the dysfunction or the non-functioning team, and sometimes interventions happen, but they don't actually make an impact long term on the team or on the individuals. And that is the problem. So what we found, and this is through a body of work of my colleagues, Professor Vanessa Druskett and Dr. Stephen Wolf, we found that it's really important to tackle the emotional dimension, but tackle it comprehensively. And what their work, 25 years of research, has shown, if you want an averagely performing team, do 3 things, which are at the bottom: set the fundamentals, clear goals, meetings that are effective, and clear roles. That's what you do if you want an averagely performing team. But if you want a team that's really outstanding, where you have psychological safety, team identity, constructive dialogue, you absolutely need to build a set of 9 norms which are listed there. So that you know, for me, is like the core of what executive team coaching is. So I want to now move into what are the organizational pains. And this is where, because, you know, those of you who know me from other EMCC sessions know that what I love about these opportunities to connect together is that we actually shape the field through the conversations that we have. And that's why I love these conversations together. So with executive team coaching, organizational pains, I've mentioned the storehouse, but I'm curious to ask you about the storehouse that you see. What do you see stacked up in the executive teams that you're close to, or the teams that you are near? So we've got a question coming into the chat now. So we're going to take 10 minutes, see shortly. We would love to invite you to copy into chat the organizational pains that you see in the storehouse of any executive teams you're close to. All right, thank you for. So who is to blame for things which go wrong in the executive team? So yeah, that's a great question. Who is to blame? Any thoughts on that? David, thank you, David.
Yeah, I'd be curious about the motivation for wanting to pin blame.
Well, I think it's something very typical among humans to look for a scapegoat, not to take the blame or the responsibility yourself, but to look for other people.
Okay. Anything else in the chat that you're curious about, or anything? What are your thoughts on what you're reading?
I think the issue of trust and understanding in between where the executive team is, where it's functioning at, and then where junior or subordinates or other team members feel they're at, and what's happening in this gap.
Thank you, John.
Cheers.
I actually got triggered by the beautiful analogy of this goldfish in the bowl. And actually, well, in our breakout session, what it actually occurred to me is from outside, it looks like a very large, fish bowl with goldfishes. But actually, each of these fishes are in their own bowl inside a large goldfish. Yeah. And from outside, it looks like they're all together, but they're all in their own visible or invisible silos they're operating within. That's how it came up for me. And
thank you, Bala. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So any other, so I'm curious about, I mean, I said earlier that most teams, at this level are non-functional. I think dysfunctional would be too strong, but I'm curious about the experiences of all of the executive team coaches here today. What is your experience? Who wants to jump in?
Uncertainty. I think uncertainty within the executive team about what it is they need to do, pulling things together into some sort of shape as we emerge post-COVID. There's two sides to this. I think one is the the legitimate acknowledgement that people have been in a dark place that nobody would have wished on themselves. But there is a point at which they seem to be saying this dialogue needs to come to an end. It needs to tail off, and we need to be talking about what's achievable, what's new, how we're actually adjusting to a very different future. And it may well be, I'm thinking, that they're not that sure about it themselves. So the confidence to communicate that uncertainty, I think, would be a good thing. So, we're not sure how we're going to get there, but here's the journey, would probably be a much better thing than than maybe what I'm seeing with one team that I'm thinking of, which is what do we need to do to help our subordinate teams? Well, that's all well and good, but you're part of it. And I think, to take Bala's analogy, you're one of those fish in that bowl. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Anyone else want one room for a lot of people looking outside is very different. Wendy, could you speak to what you've just written in chat, please?
Yeah, just there's so many outside influences, whether, what kind of media we're taking in, what kind of things are happening from lots of different processing of the information that we're being just constantly berated with. And depending on how we're interpreting that, and depending on, I think, the level of consciousness we have on how we're processing that and what we're taking in, I think that we can be on lots of different, totally different pathways. And how to align those pathways, I think, is, a real challenge, not only just culturally, from different country-wise diversity in cultures, but within your own culture. And it just depends on how much you're eating up that media information and how healthy it is for you or not.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. All right, so with this concept of the issues and the challenges, I think, it really brings into question, what role do we need to play as executive team coaches? And that's where I want to now move our discussion to. So you've listed a whole range of issues, and I think it's a fantastic collection. So if that's what's going on, then it really then puts the emphasis on what do we do with all of that. So let me move on to the next part. So I've called this our role as a change agent. So in other words, whether we're an executive team coach, or we're a team coach, or we're a one-to-one coach working with executives, I think that with everything that's going on, and I think whatever was going on pre-pandemic, it's all now at a much more heightened level. And I'm certainly seeing in the executive teams that we coach that in the past, when people could maybe meet together and you could see exactly, you could have a sense of what was really going on in the dynamics. Now we've got this virtual infrastructure. I know that's not the case in all parts of the world, but I think that it means that we have to really dial up our ability to help in these contexts. So what I notice is that the roles that people play in teams is so very different. So in the past, we used to do a lot of things like, one-to-one assessments, do a lot of individual assessments, and then you'd sort of look at, well, what does that mean for the group as a whole? But actually coaching the group as a group of individuals is very different to coaching the team. And what I'm curious about with that is what you're thinking about, what are the roles that we need to play given the context that I shared earlier. So I am going to just quickly dive back into the 3 principles. So at the start, we were looking at the fact that there are all these different factors to consider in team coaching, from things like, the wider system, things like the specifics here of the culture of the organization, the frameworks that we're using to actually work with the team. There's a lot of different aspects there. The relationships of the people with each other, within the team and with the leader, the team's development, the group's development, the dilemmas that come up, the leadership of the team. So there's a lot going on when you actually look at what's happening in the heart of a team. I mentioned those 3 levels, and that we're working at the intra-team level when we're doing executive team coaching. And I also mentioned that the emotional context really matters, because what we notice is that many teams might say, oh, well, we did something as a team some time ago, but it didn't really work. It didn't really fix the problems. We've still got this silo thing going on, or we still don't prioritize right, all these problems. So I mentioned about the team emotional intelligence framework. That's very much the methodology that, of choice, given that it's got performance research behind it. So with all of that said, I want to move into our next huddle. So what roles do we need to be able to play as executive team coaches, given all that's been said? What else do we need to take into consideration? So it's like a double question. What roles do we need to be able to play? And what else do we need to take into consideration? Welcome back, everybody. All right, we want to invite you to open up the chat again and copy across your thoughts. Thank you. Well, thank you already, Anna and Maureen. Thank you for right roles, meta position, systemic. So we just invite a couple of moments of silence while we all take in what's coming through in chat. Could I invite Anna to just, speak to this piece about the implicit to explicit? Would love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, in our group, we were saying from the problems before that the people don't walk the talk, but then we said, okay, how can we show them where is the path of the walk? So if we don't bring into light the issues, they will never recognize them, or they will, the moment we leave, the problem will be back there. So it is a little bit this idea of bringing into light what it is hidden and is not mentioned. It, put the name, label it.
And I get a sense from the way you conveyed that like that straight talking, that directness is going to be absolutely key for doing that. We can't go all around, the houses. I called it a storehouse, but we don't want to go all around. We want to just really be able to name those issues. We had a situation just in the last 2 weeks of a company where CEO, well, there were like two CEOs, the original one and the new one that was brought in while the previous one was still there. And so you had this, and they were wondering like why they weren't making progress. And the straight talking is basically saying you need one CEO, and therefore the second person needs to find something else to do. And let's talk together about what that thing is. Like, you have to bring that straight talking. So anything else you're curious about that's come up in the chat?
So what I mentioned was that it was in a context this point came in, is that when the leadership communicates, do not load it in a way that it's totally misunderstood by different party, even in that meeting. When they go out, it takes a totally different meaning altogether and implement it differently. So say it in a way which is clearly understood, and it's clean and clear for interpretation. This is actually comes from your earlier point you mentioned in terms of driving for clarity. Clarity sometimes leads to clear actions and clear deliverables, and clarity has its own consequences. That's why the clean language came in.
Oh, okay, thank you for that, Bala.
Yeah.
I think we're living a time where we can't be fuzzy.
Yeah.
We're living, with all the chaos going on, and I think, what I really have appreciated in the team coaching standards, the topic of self-care.
Yeah.
For us as team coaches is very much, a theme in what, because we can't be clear if we're not taking care of ourselves and bringing that, full self forward. So, right. But thank you for all that you've put in chat. As I said earlier, what's really good about these dialogues is that we actually together we further our thinking by hearing from all the different perspectives around the world. So let me move into the top tips, and then we'll have a little bit of time for any questions at the end. So top tips for developing your executive team coaching practice. So I've summed it up as 3 top tips. So let me start with the first one. So just because you are brilliant at one-to-one executive coaching, it doesn't mean you'll be outstanding as an executive team coach. And I wish I had known this when I started out, because I very much came from executive coaching myself. So 11 years ago, when I first started working with teams, I just thought, well, it's just a multiple. I'm doing great work one-on-one, I'll just, and it will all be fine. But actually, it's been, I'm continually learning, and it's been quite a journey. And I think that this kind of leads into, in a way, the second tip, because wherever you are, I definitely would recommend, and again, I've learned this the hard way, use a team coaching supervisor to accelerate your development as an executive team coach. What I have loved about team coaching supervision as a supervisee is that my team coaching supervisor uses the 7 Eyes model to actually have a discussion. So when you apply the 7 Eyes model, but it's to the team coaching topic, and this 7 Eyes model has got so much like practice now behind it, but we've been applying it for team coaching. So the 7 Eyes are basically, you look at the team. So in this case, so in one-to-one coaching, it's the client, but the first eye is the team. When it's, you're dealing with that intra-team level, you also look at the team coaching interventions and the tools that you're using. That comes into supervision. You're looking at the team and the relationship with the team coach. That's eye number 3. You're looking at the team coaches together. We always travel, when we do team coaching, we always do executive team coaching in 2 or 3 team coaches together. We never go solo as a team coach. I've tried it. It doesn't work because you actually, however big the team, you definitely need at least 2 team coaches in the room, preferably 3. I5 is the supervision relationship. So that's the team coach supervisor with the coach, the team coach team. I6 is your supervision process. How is that supervision process actually being done? And I7 is the wider system. So that's not only the system of the team, but it's also the whole wider system of what we're dealing with in the world and bringing that into team coaching supervision. My third tip is this continual and consistent improvement of knowledge of teams. So these topics have got deep bodies of research, but they're all important. Group dynamics, group development, and the role of emotion in teams. And just, you know, continue your learning path on all of those. I'm now, I believe I'm in year 31 of doing coaching and 11 years doing team coaching, but I believe that there's just so much more to learn. I've got a community of practice. If anybody wants to stay connected, you know, with pleasure, I'm happy to stay in touch, you know, on LinkedIn.
Geetu, can I say thank you very, very much for leading this conversation. I think that the comments in the chat have been extremely rich, and I think that the perspectives that we've all been gaining and sharing have been absolutely invaluable. I was saying earlier on, I've seen different teams of different sizes at different levels operating you know, throughout my career, really, and I see similarities depending on whichever teams I happen to be, but also differences too. And I think that the information that you've brought out and the insight we've all gained has been absolutely invaluable. Thank you, Geetu.
And Nicola, thank you to you, because you know, this is probably, it must be our 4th dialogue together, and you know, the quality of the dialogues is also the quality of the support and the organization. And I know that you've had last-minute emails about links and things. I really appreciate all that you've done, and thank you to all of you. We're going to close this part of the session, move into networking. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to, you know, staying in touch and hearing about your executive team coaching practices.